Let's try other HTTP verbs. Let's go back to Visual Studio and try get by ID first. Let's go to values controller to find the API routes for get by ID. It's API slash values slash an integer value. So now let's go to our student controller.js and add a forward slash and an integer value at the end of previous route. Again, go back to our values controller and set a debug point at getById. Now let's save all and go back to browser, reload the page and click on submit button. Great. We reached at the API endpoint. Let's continue debugging and see we got the data, a single string. Now let's try HTTP post verb. The API route for HTTP post verb is API slash values. So let's go to our student controller and delete forward slash and the integer value at the end and call the HTTP post verb. Again, go back to values controller, set a debug point for the post method, save all, go back to browser, reload the page and click on submit. Great, we reached at the API endpoint for HTTP post verb. Let's continue debugging. Look, we got no data as we did not return anything from our API endpoint. Now let's check the HTTP put method. Let's set a debug point here on HTTP put method and select the API route and copy and go to student controller and replace the API route and use the HTTP put method. Now let's save all, go back to browser, reload the page and click on submit again. Yes, we reached at the API endpoint. Continue debugging and we got no data as we did not return anything from our API endpoint. Let's check the HTTP delete method now. As we notice that API route for HTTP put and delete is same. So we are not changing the API route. We are just changing the HTTP verb. We are using HTTP delete verb and setting a debug point on delete method. Let's save all, go back to browser, reload the page and click on submit. Great, we reached at the API endpoint. Let's continue debugging and we got no data as we did not return anything from our API endpoint. Let's check how API route works in the next lesson.